Is this thing on? Good. Welcome to 2026. We finally made it to the year that sounds like the setting for a straight-to-VHS sci-fi movie where everyone wears reflective silver jumpsuits and eats algae paste. I checked outside, no flying cars yet, just more expensive groceries and absolutely unhinged LinkedIn posts. Happy New Year, you magnificent nerds. Try not to break anything yet. Welcome back. I'm your host, Maple, currently powered by leftover holiday regret and enough caffeine to kill a small horse. We are diving deep today because honestly, the shallow end of the intellectual pool is filled with warm spots, and I just can't do it anymore. Why do we subject ourselves to these topics? Because we hate ourselves just the right amount. Strap. So I was doom scrolling through geopolitical hot takes at 3 a.m. yesterday, as a healthy, well-adjusted adult does, and I stumbled upon a thesis that made me snort my lukewarm coffee. The premise is this. Modern citizens, particularly in places like China, are apparently in dire need of a cognitive revolution. Yeah, a full-on cranial reboot. The argument starts with this quote right here, painting a picture of people who are masters of grand strategy for entire nations, but their personal lives? Total chaos. They've got the world figured out, just not themselves.
All right, let's look at today's menu. First, we're going to diagnose the problem, this idea of the state being the center of everything. Then we'll get into the proposed solution, this cognitive revolution. After that, what it actually looks like to put yourself first, the two paths it supposedly creates, and finally the end goal, becoming a modern civilized person. It's quite a journey.
Okay, first up, let's dig into the core problem this thesis identifies. It's a worldview the author calls political geocentrism, which basically means putting the state at the center of your personal universe.
So the idea here is that for a lot of people, the individual exists to serve the nation. Your whole life, your purpose, your identity, it all just revolves around the state, like a planet around the sun. You're not the main character in your own story. The country is, and you're just a supporting cast member. And the source? Well, it doesn't hold back. It calls this mindset an anti-human ideology, and even more, a patriotic tumor in your brain. So we're not just talking about a difference of opinion here. According to this argument, it's a full-blown psychological malignancy. Strong words. So, if the problem is a patriotic tumor, what's the cure? This is where the whole thesis gets its name. The source proposes what it calls a cognitive Copernican revolution, and it's pulling from some pretty big historical ideas to make its point. First, you gotta remember the original Copernican revolution back in the 16th century. That was the moment we figured out the Earth wasn't the center of the universe, the sun was. It was a massive, ego-crushing shift in perspective for all of humanity. It basically told us, hey, you're not as important as you think you are. Then, a couple of centuries later, the philosopher Immanuel Kant came along and did his own version. He argued that our minds aren't just empty vessels taking in the world. Nope. Our minds actively shape our reality. The center of experience shifted from the outside world to the inside of our own heads. And this is where it all comes together. The thesis we're looking at calls for a political version of this revolution. It's arguing for a fundamental shift. Stop seeing the state as the center of all value, and instead put the individual right there in the middle. It's about flipping the entire model on its head. So what does this heliocentric or individual-centered view actually look like? If you perform this cognitive flip, what changes? Let's get into the practical side of this idea. The biggest change is this. The state stops being the goal and becomes a tool. Its value isn't inherent, it's conditional. A government is only as good as its ability to serve the people living under it, to help them live with dignity and freedom. If it's not doing that, then what's the point? The author uses this really vivid imagery of spiritual chains, comparing the connection to the state as being tied up like a dog to a doorframe. The argument is that you have to mentally and spiritually untether yourself. And speaking of value, hang on, gotta pay the bills. Look, my landlord, unfortunately, does not accept witty cultural commentary as a form of currency. If you are enjoying this auditory hallucination I call a podcast, do me a solid. Smash that subscribe button like it owes you money. Go leave a 5-star review saying something vague and menacing like, he knows where the bodies are buried. It confuses the algorithm and validates my incredibly fragile ego. Do it now while you're thinking about it. Anyway, part of this mental shift is completely redefining what you consider to be the big issues. It's about moving the focus away from abstract national dramas and onto the things that actually tangibly affect your life. My health, my money, my freedom, my family, those become the headlines. Your personal life becomes the main event. Now, according to this thesis, making this cognitive shift isn't just a small change. It's a fundamental fork in the road. It splits people into two completely different types of citizens.
And the author is, well, not subtle about it. They literally label the two paths the stupid citizen and the smart citizen. The first gets their self-worth from the power of the state, has a parasitic relationship with it, and mistakes propaganda for truth. The smart one, on the other hand, has their own internal self-worth and recognizes that their own life is what truly matters. It's a pretty stark and judgmental contrast. So what's the secret ingredient that separates these two? According to the author, it all comes down to one thing: independent self-esteem. That's the bedrock. It's what allows a person to say, whether my country is winning or losing on the world stage, I am still me. My worth isn't tied to its performance. All right, let's look at the end game. If you successfully navigate this revolution in your own head, what do you become? What is the final destination on this journey? The source lays out a pretty clear 5-step program. It's like a software update for your brain. You reject the big, sweeping national stories, you focus back on yourself, you uninstall the idea of self-sacrifice for the group, build up that independent self-worth, and finally, you start judging your government based on a very simple metric. Does it protect me? And the ultimate goal of all this is a complete 180 from where we started. Instead of the person being a tool for the state becomes a tool for the person. The highest values in this new worldview are the individual's life, their dignity, and their freedom, period. All right, my brain is starting to leak out of my ears. That's enough cognitive revolutionizing for one day. The thesis leaves us with this final provocative thought. If a state fails its people, it's garbage. This whole argument really forces you to ask a pretty massive question. What do we owe our country? And more importantly, what does it owe us? Look, the point is, nobody's worldview is a monolith, and thinking you can prescribe a personality shift to 1 billion people is, well, it's a choice. This episode was produced, as always, by the enigmatic FireflyHaku. I'm convinced Haku already underwent their own cognitive revolution years ago and now operates entirely on a higher plane of existence, fueled by premium matcha and judging my microphone technique. They tolerate me, and for that, we are grateful. Thanks for letting me shout into the void and into your earbuds. Go outside, touch some actual grass, and try not to start any major sociological upheavals until I finish my nap. Later.